one of the things I want to get in is that obviously this week was the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre. And there were everybody, I want to say, did a piece on it. And I'm very happy that everybody did a piece on it because there's different audiences and different folks to watch it. So if it's on a different station, you could not, if you didn't want to learn about this thing, you could not do it. Yay. So I was very, very happy. At first, it came into my mind, why would so many different groups do it? And then it came to my mind, but hey, how many people are just learning about this today? Just learning about what happened with the Tulsa Massacre because nobody talked about it. So the fact that everybody's talking about it now, I actually applaud that, and I'm very happy. I got a chance to speak with Marco Williams, who worked with Russell Westbrook, who he did
Stanley.
Yeah, and Stanley Nelson about his project. I also got a chance to speak with Deborah Riley Draper, who did a piece on OWN for OWN as well. And then I watched, man, I'm probably like 4 or 5 of them. What's really interesting is that KB, you mentioned that, look, Reggie, I can only watch one of those things. Totally understand that. I totally understand that. I watched it for a couple of reasons. I needed to learn more. I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. And each of the pieces that I watched took a different bent. They told the same story, but they took a different bent on how they told the story. And I actually learned that one of my friends of his family was the Stratfords. So, and I've known him forever. And so I didn't even know that was his family. So I learned a lot about this. I think it's really important. And this is what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that people who are probably saying to themselves, I don't want to see this, I can't see this, that you'll at least watch at least watch one of these, because I think it'll be important. So I'm gonna go to the first person who only watched one of them. KB, talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because when you watch, you will be like, well, where are our reparations? That's probably going to be the first question when you watch. But yes, I watch the History channels, which is called Tulsa Burning, the 1921 Race Massacre. What I did appreciate about this one is because, I do have, I don't know everything, but I do have a breadth of knowledge and a foundation on the massacre that I learned kind of years before the resurgence of this information. And so we've kind of seen a lot of depictions in pop culture. We saw it in Watchmen, and we saw an uptick in people Googling 1921 Tulsa Massacre after Watchmen, debuted. And then again, we see parts of it in Lovecraft Country. So, it's out there now in pop culture as well. And so I think it has piqued some additional people's interests. I do think that everyone should watch at least one, if not more, just to get clarity and understanding. I too actually had the opportunity to talk to Stanley Nelson about this, documentary, putting it together, our history, our legacy, and what that means. But what I did like about this one is how it tied into present day. Like what are we doing now? How does it tie into present day? What do these and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the term that they use. It's not really survivors, but it's they call them something. I know that they're ancestors of those people, who were involved in that massacre, but I can't remember what it's called, so apologies. But speaking to them about like how they've moved forward and what life looks like, and not being defined by this massacre. I think oftentimes too, we are defined as Black people by our trauma, but often in this particular documentary, I remember hearing a couple of the people say, we are still thriving. Tulsa is still thriving. Like for us, Greenwood is still thriving, and they want people to know that. and to not be so, just rooted in the trauma of what happened in the past, but look at it as history and know that they are still moving forward and they're moving ahead, and pressing ahead in the right way. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was a remarkable documentary. And I know that there was one that debuted on CBS on Sunday, that I am going to watch because it is, I did record it, it is on DVR, and I do want to take a look at that one as well. But for me, some of the images are very challenging to see, and it's very hard to navigate this trauma. So I wanted to make space in between watching them to be able to feel or deal with whatever I needed to, or those, my family members who are watching it as well, to make that space before watching it.
Yeah, and I want to say this, KB, it really wasn't a dig that you only watched one. I want to say that for the record, because it to watch these, it really does get under your skin. Like, really, how did this happen? How did they do it? I mean, it's just, and it's so much. So yeah, thanks. I'm glad you did watch it. And I part 2 of the one on OWN is on the 8th. So I'm going to watch part 2 of that as well. And I like the fact that they actually put it in parts, because to your point, watching a lot of that, you'll get like, really. Join the conversation, Katya.
Sorry, I muted myself because I was coughing. But here's the thing. I'm watching this, and per usual, I'm like, it's important for us to know our history. Once again, it reinforces the fact that we weren't out there in the winds, lost after slavery. And that we did have, amongst very strenuous times, our own little piece of heaven. You know what I mean? Beverly Jenkins is a writer that does historical romance novels, but they're based on on real life, like Black people living in Black towns, not just in the Midwest, but out West. And we don't hear enough about that. Again, we're not taught that, you know what I mean? And also the part that we, once again, the white people who are in charge, is not a dig against white people, it's just the truth, decided to erase this in order to silence this, in order to cover it up. Kind of like what we're fighting right now, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's why you have all these generations that didn't know. I mean, it's heartbreaking to hear a guy say, I'm at the University of Oklahoma and my white professor is standing there and talking about the Tulsa Massacre. And I'm like, hey,
that didn't happen.
Tulsa. That never happened. And they're like, yes, it did. And boom, exhibit A, B through C, right? And again, when you erase things, it's easier to justify things. It's easier to other people. It's easier to, dismiss people. And this is why it's very dangerous when we start saying, you can teach this book, but you can't teach that book. You can't do this and you can't do that. And as a parent, I'm very glad that my child is older, because I don't want that for my child. I want you to read everything. I want you to grow up and use your critical thinking skills. I want you to be able to say, you know what, something about this isn't right. This needs to be done better. And why I'm glad we got the survivors to tell the story. And I believe that they're living this long for a reason, so that we can get the testimony and also all the other ones that they got. So once again, we don't have people saying, well, it was in the past, I had nothing to do with it, but you're benefiting from it. And the part that I really wanted to see is them also talking to some white people, like, do you feel as though you owe something to your cohorts? Because I'm sorry, $100,000, there's a check big enough that you can write to give the ancestors back what was lost. Because as the lady said, if that town would have been left alone, the wealth, the amount, it would have set up generations till today to be fine. And I really do, in times like this, I'm like, do you not feel as though you owe something to these people? Because you literally benefited of something that was done to them. And I don't like when it seems as though it's Black people's responsibility to solve something that was done to them. And that's the only thing that was missing a little bit. I didn't see the OWN one. I saw the CBS and I saw the CNN one. And that to me is a part of the conversation that's crucial, where white people don't get to sit there and kind of like dismiss it as in the past, because even today they're prospering, the Black people aren't, because they're divided by a racetrack and they're divided by a highway.
And I think to Reggie, your point, the Stratford Hotel, like I do remember hearing that, today it would have been worth, I think they said $100 million or something like that. And the generational wealth that would have been in the Stratford family, had it not been a casualty in that. Yeah, like I was like, you're right, Katia. Like, I think oftentimes when it comes to Black and brown people, it often falls on our shoulders to solve the problem. And we didn't create the problem, so why do we need to find a solution?
So a couple of things that I want to go ahead.
I'm sorry to cut you off. It needs to be like home ownership. A lot of people frown upon it, but at the end of the day, majority of us, when you ask, what do you have to show for your hard work? 99% of us, it's our home. They don't even have facilitated path for home ownership, which is really important because it opens up so many financial doors, because you have equity, you have something to trade with. And that's a conversation that I would like to see. You know what I mean? Don't build a house on the bad plot, but there were homes. All the descendants, you did a house.
There's so much that all of these pieces showed, and so I'll mention a few of them because we're getting close to the end. But it's very interesting to show at least 3 of them showed the connection between African Americans and the five tribes, Native American tribes. That was interesting for people who wouldn't know that, and having that association and how that impacted the land that they had, is that they got land that they were the only Black folks, so to speak, to get that 40 acres and a mule. So really interesting in this. So you get all this land and now it's not yours anymore. The other thing that I want to point out is that the reason this is important is not just about Tulsa. It's about how this has happened for so many other communities. So what I'm excited about is that the people who didn't watch Rosewood, because nobody watched Rosewood, because if you look at the box office numbers for Rosewood, you'd be like, nope, nobody saw that movie. And that maybe it'll open up the opportunity for us to learn about all the other towns and cities that this has happened to, because it didn't just happen to Tulsa. The thing about Tulsa is they got airplanes and all kind of other things that happened there, so it made it a little bit worse. But there were plenty of Black towns that were burned up and destroyed. So I'm very happy that we look at it there. And then the third thing I think is that you talked about this a little bit, KB, in terms of how it. Well, one of you guys talked about how it comes to current day. And this thing of running highways through our cities, because Tulsa was rebuilt. They said they rebuilt it and they got it back, the 30 to 40 odd blocks. But let's run that highway straight through and destroys the economy and does that type of thing. So when we talk about culpability, who's responsible, it's very, very interesting that we get to that. The last thing I want to make a point on is something that you said, Katia. I'm glad that most of them didn't dwell on the white people yet. We'll get to the white people next. After we tell the real, put out the evidence. It's just like going to court. It's like, you said, no, that didn't happen. Oh, okay. All right. Let me show you. Here was the this, here was the that, this was the this, here are the graves, the people who were buried, and so on and so forth. So we've established all the facts. Now we can really come to the table and say, okay, how are these people going to be compensated? That lady who's 107 years old, will she get compensated in her lifetime?
They're offering them $100,000, but I'm like,
I mean, well, one, that's not enough.
That's not enough. You can buy a house or whatever, but it's still like it's a compounded interest, the equity, all of that. Like, if you really start doing the math, we're going to be in the millions, like KB said. And to me, it's like, I don't want the white people's perspective about what happened, because we know how they skewed it and erased it. What I want to hear from them is, what are
accountability?
No, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. The mayor, the mayor,
she's 107 though, so like she could die tomorrow. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
That's
like,
right. That's
we cannot put it. She could die tomorrow. She could die today. Like, we cannot hinge it on this. Right?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Well,
I to come out of their pocket.
Last word, Katya. Go ahead.
I'm like, the white folks need to come out of their pocket for her grandkids, her great grandkids, and the list goes on. And I don't want to hear, well, you didn't do it, but you benefited from it. So cut a check, everybody.
I am in total agreement. Well, I'm hoping that people will seek out some of these programs. I'm glad you taped the CBS one, because I didn't see it, and I did tape the CBS. Oh, I did tape the CBS one as well, and I'm going to watch that as well. So thanks on that.